Back in December of 2017, the applicant was before this commission, and there was a motion made by Commissioner Hendricks that said, continue item number 8, conditional use for Rocky Mountain Power and Heber Light Power, and invite them to address as many of the concerns as they can. These include the intent of the Wasatch County mission, valid character, how they are addressing the CUP items, conditional use permit items, routing, is the line adequate both for the current and future, rough costs of overhead and bearing, plans for involving other jurisdictions if there are other entities involved with this area, and addressing the question of easements and rights of way to be scheduled for the February meeting. Obviously, we didn't go to February. Here we are, had a special meeting in June, on June 4th. Commissioner Jukes at that time made a motion to continue this matter to the next planning commission meeting, which will be the July 11th meeting, with the following specific instructions that the applicant address only the proposed substation and whether it complies itself for a conditional use permit, specifically looking at whether the detrimental effects can be mitigated. It is not anticipated that we will have any further discussion about the power lines, just be focused on the substation according to our discussion today. Also, public comment is closed as to other matters. Again, my motion is that we will table this discussion until next month. The only further evidence to be presented by the applicant is relating to the substation and whether itself qualifies for a conditional use permit, and looking at the mitigating factors, and then we will make the decision. As to the whole application, we will only deal with that issue. The location of the poles will not be expected to be addressed, and the applicant is not expected to present further evidence on that. So, those are the two motions that have been made. Just real briefly, let me go through the conditional uses. And conditional uses are essentially a use that's intended to be allowed but may require conditions. It might have more impacts than a typical permitted use. So it's intended that it's made compatible through these conditions. The state code basically says that you shall approve conditional uses if those uses can have mitigation that accomplishes or mitigates those negative effects. Along with that, we have a laundry list of items that need to be complied with as far as conditional use items, and this is in your staff report. This is essentially the burden of proof is upon Heber Light Power and Rocky Mountain Power to address these items in the conditional use section of the code. I know some of this will be redundant, so I thought I'd go through this fairly quickly because Heber Light Power has their own presentation. But this is the overall map that we discussed last time in the June 4th meeting. So we've got the segments starting at the north on the upper right. That is the let's see, 1.6 mile section that goes from below the dam on Old Highway 40 and then crosses Highway 42 and heads south west to Highway 40. So this is a line that will, on the old Highway 40, before you get to 32, will have the distribution mounted on the lines. Then when you get to Highway 32, it will have distribution buried until we get to the point where the new lines start at the North College entrance. Those lines are 65 to 90 feet in height. We go to the poles. So that's the segment that we just talked about. That stops, like I said, the North College access, which is where the substation is. There you can see a little bit further to the east. The second segment is, you can see all the way down Highway 40 is the line that's already been put in. And then there's a gap between Highway 40 where the green line starts on what's labeled as segment 2 up there. That's because that portion is in Heber City. So they'll have to go through their process. So this new line is intended to go from that point in Heber City and follow the proposed or potential bypass route. And I want to be clear that we don't know if that will end up being the bypass route. As I mentioned in our work meeting, they're going through an environmental impact statement, and so it may or may not be that route. But they're intending to go along that route that's shown there on the map. Distribution through that area to be buried, and the lines will be wood except for at the corners, and the heights are 70 to 85 feet. Close above that segment, it will cross 113 and then head west on Southfield Road back into Heber City where that gap is there, you can see, across from the county park. I wanted to show this. This is the existing lines out on Highway 40. It's not very visible, but you can see this kind of a galvanized lower line on that second pole, which is distribution. So in those areas, they'll bury that distribution, which means they can go either lower poles or poles that have a farther span, so fewer poles. And that's one of the things that the commission will need to decide as one of the conditions of the approval if they go that route. I also wanted to point out that dead-end structure there in the end, which is a huge structure. And I only point that out because that's something that we're hopeful that we do not see on Highway 113 with the same type of scenario. And I think their proposal is going away from that type of structure there. So here's the bypass route. Be along that bypass route A. This is a rendering that my department did with that dead-end structure, but photoshopped in on both sides of the Highway 113. So this is what we're hopeful that we don't see, is those metal poles that are large diameter right at that highway for everybody to drive past between Midway and Heber. You can see on the top slide, the top picture, the existing conditions, and then on the bottom one, the proposed conditions. So one of the things I think the Planning Commission should be specific about and intentional about is the wood poles at that location, hopefully, and a setback from Highway 113. Segment 3, well, let's go to the substation. The substation is a new substation that's proposed on 650 South. So you can see the gap in the line. You can see the gap right here that goes into Heber City and then down to 650 South. And we'll run west on 650 South into the substation. And the substation was a lengthy point of discussion at our last meeting on June 4th. So let me just go to that. So this is a 20-acre parcel with the substation intended to be on the 10-acre south portion of the property. You can see on this slide to the west, or sorry, to the east, the brown portion and the skinny orange lines that go up there. That's the bypass alignment and the deeded right-of-way. Heber City owns that. I believe it's about 110, 114 feet wide. And then the ODS portion on the corner.
So that's why that's that little gap in your line is actually now Heber.
Well, this gap right here is Heber.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And then this is Heber, and the bypass route alignment is right there. The deeded 114 feet. It's the orange line. The orange line is the go right here. You can see that. There was a question about complying with the RA5 section of the code. And the RA5 section of the code says you can't have buildings, structures on more than 20% of the site. The applicant's gone through and drawn boxes around those areas, including the substation portion, and they've come up with 14.5% of the site being structures they'll address that as part of their PowerPoint as well. We've, as staff, verified that. This shows their landscape rendering. And, they're proposing to have a berm. This went to the Heber Light and Power Board. There was the discussion of having a precast concrete wall that I believe is 8 feet in height, or doing a berm and landscaping. I think Heber Light and Power Board voted to do the landscaping. I think, maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure if both those options are still open, but that's what they're proposing tonight, is the berming. It's a 5 foot, if you can see the upper cross section there on the upper right, it's a 5 foot berm. I put that as a minimum. And I measured the narrowest portion of landscaping, and it was at 40 feet. This is one we got just the other day, and I'm not sure if this has changed or not, but the one that we were initially given, minimum depth on the buffer was 40 feet. There's 110 trees, which are a mixture of evergreen and deciduous, so we hope to have somewhat of a year-round buffer. And the lighting on the site will be dark sky compliant. So this is a 3D rendering of what they're proposing with their buffer and landscaping. We've also got on the right, you can see the precast concrete wall in there. And a close-up of those cross sections. If we go to segment 3, that's the 2.1 mile section that goes down 650 south and then jogs south by the sewer farm, or the sewer treatment plant, and then heads west to Highway 113. That purple section is, if you'll remember, is a portion that becomes redundant, that gets removed. But in that area, in that 2.1 miles, as I mentioned, they removed the obsolete section. Distribution is on the poles above ground. With the thought through that area, it's not as big of an impact, but in those areas, it's 70 to 85 feet in height with the distribution on the lines. And then the last segment, from here up to this point is all Midway City, and I'll be addressing that as part of their approval. But the line will run north to the substation that's just west of the cemetery. From what I understand, there's no improvements that need to be made to those substations. They can clarify that as part of the presentation, but that's what my understanding is. Before we talk about some new transformers in there, I understand that's not the case now. So this shows the line that will head north. This is the improved part of Ward's Lane. And those lines will be updated and increase in height. The intent is all those are wood as well. I can't remember if distribution is there to do that or not. Distribution to their area as well. So it's the 65 to 80 feet in pole height through that section. So points to consider. The proposal is a conditional use and impacts into the use should, if possible, be mitigated with conditions. The proposal has been approved by the Heber Light and Power Board, which is made up of elected officials. The Heber Light and Power Board recommended that the distribution lines in specific areas be varied, allowing for the potential of lower pole height and or greater spans between poles. The applicant has the burden of providing the information necessary for the Planning Commission to understand the request and any proposed mitigations to make an informed decision to satisfy the requirements of the conditional use code. Due to the preliminary nature of the proposal, meaning the engineering has not been completed, exact heights and materials of the poles in each specific location have not been determined. However, as mentioned, the Planning Commission needs to have enough information to be able to understand the impacts of the proposal. So what we've been told is that everywhere they can use wooden poles, they will be using wooden poles. In areas where they have a corner that needs more support, they'll have the rusted metal poles. The item was heard and continued on December 27th, and the list of items to be satisfied. Also continued on June 4th for some additional information on the the substation. So the proposed mitigations by the applicant for the power line are that they use non-specular wire, which is a less reflective wire. They use wood poles where feasible and rusted metal only where design requires. And then they remove the distribution lines in all areas that are critical as far as aesthetics, which allows fewer lines on poles and fewer poles due to larger spans, which also removes the distribution costs on it. Removal of the distribution lines means they're buried. So the proposed conditions. Number one, the applicant should keep the heights of the power poles as low as possible, so that this may require more poles in order to keep the power lines at a minimum required separation from the ground. So that's one option that I think the Planning Commission needs to make a decision on. Or B, the applicant should install the fewest number of poles as possible. This may require heights at the high end of the range in more places, but would result in an overall lower number of poles. The applicant should not go higher than necessary to meet the safety and code requirements. Number two, the applicant must demonstrate that the proposal can satisfy the necessary findings outlined in 162307 and with mitigating conditions being acceptable use. Number three, distribution lines through the more noticeable parts of the system must be buried. A clear commitment by the applicant to specific areas and lengths should be determined. Number four, demonstration and clear understanding of the Highway 113 crossing at Southwood Road with particular attention to setbacks from the highway for the poles and consideration of wood poles and not larger metal terminus poles. Number five, all poles through the straight portion should be wood with corner poles being rusted steel. Number six, the maximum height limit for power poles is 110 on corner and in poles and 90 on all other poles. Number seven, the lines should be non-spectral or low reflective lines to reduce visual impact. Number eight, all horizontal bars, including distribution lines where used, shall be rusted and not galvanized. And number nine, in all areas where two lines exist, Rocky Mountain Power, either line power, two or three lines exist, I should say, shall co-locate lines. I wanted to also go through the findings and conditions of the substation while we're all doing the presentation. So if that's okay, I'll go through those quickly. 1607 for findings of the substation. 1607-03 of the Wasatch County Code lists electric substations as conditional use. Number two, the land use authority shall approve conditional uses if reasonable conditions to mitigate negative effects can be imposed. Number three, the Planning Commission is the land use authority in this situation where they are reviewing a conditional use. Number four, the applicant has demonstrated, now this is something that needs to be found by the Planning Commission, it's yet to be found. The applicant needs to demonstrate that the commission, to the commission, that the proposal complies with section 162307 of the current Wasatch County Code related to conditional uses, and the impacts have been substantially mitigated by specific conditions listed. Number five, the proposal complies with Wasatch Code chapter 1607, which is the RA5 sections of code. So that was setbacks, that was coverage of structures, those types of things. Number six, the proposal complies with the Wasatch Code 160709, requiring the height of structures to not exceed 35 feet above the natural grade, noting that the conditional use of power poles over 49 feet in 16073 is a specific provision of code for power pole heights that governs overall the general limitation on the height of dwellings and structures, and which interpretation is in accordance with how the county has approved power poles throughout the county. That's an option. Number seven, the proposal complies with the Wasatch Code 1607-12, requiring buildings and structures to not cover more than 20% of the area of the lot or parcel of land. Number eight, the landscape plan presented, if approved by the commission, provides a mixture of evergreen and deciduous trees that, along with the minimum 5-foot berm, will provide the necessary screening to mitigate the detrimental effects of the ground-mounted equipment. Number nine, there are no known zoning violations of property on the property at this time. So the conditions, proposed conditions are that the landscape plan must specifically be a mixture of deciduous and evergreen trees with species and sizes placed strategically to buffer the more impactful areas of the substation. The landscape plan approved should have at a minimum 110 trees and sizes as per code section 162110, which requires trees to be 2-inch caliper and 6 feet in height at the time of planting. The berming shall be a minimum of 5 feet in height as shown in the plans or as determined by the planning commission. Number 4, any expansion of the use would require submittal of another conditional use application. Number 5, any lighting installed on the substation property will need to be dark sky compliant with full cutoff. Number 6, coverage of the site shall be in compliance with 1607-12, including expansions, any future expansions. Number 7, consideration of having the substation setbacks equal distances from the south, east, and west property lines. It's a little bit further to the west, if you notice on the site plan, from that east property line. All landscaping must be maintained in perpetuity. That should go without saying. I'm not saying these guys wouldn't do that, but you'd be surprised how many businesses don't maintain the landscaping. Number 9, landscaping must be installed at the time of the construction of the substation. Are there any questions for me?
Questions? Okay. Okay. Can we? I just want to clarify some of the different proposed conditions, findings, and other suggested conditions that you've outlined. So I wish I could control this, but I can't. Can you go back a couple of slides? One more, stop. One more. Okay, right there. So for number 4, I understand what your concern is. I share the concern that that needs to look good as the power crosses 113. But I'm not, unfortunately, I go into lawyer mode and contracts and do we get enough clarity to ever really specify what we mean? So I think the intent is good, your demonstration and clear understanding of the 113 crossing in Southfield Road, but what does that mean? Do we need like a survey and we're going to put a pole here and we're going to put a pole here? Should we be that specific? Because I don't think we have that kind of detail, do we? And I'll look to the applicant as well. Do we have like a drawing, a site plan?
I don't know that we have that kind of deal, but I would hope that this commission can say, no, these need to be wood poles, and they need to be removed, I don't know if it's 100 feet or 200 feet off that right-of-way. What I don't want to have happen is you approve it, and then it comes back after their design is done, and lo and behold, we have metal terminal poles there.
Well, okay, fine, and I agree with you, but it's more than just wooden poles. It's where are they, how far away are they from the road? And in order to be effective with this and to approve it, I don't know how we approve it without saying the poles go here and they're this tall and they're wooden.
Well, and I think, and that's what unfortunately, it's a comfort level by the commission as far as whether they've satisfied you with this information. And I get that it's a catch-22 with them, that they haven't spent the money to do all the final engineering on it. Hopeful they can get up in their presentation and say, oh, I think we can make this work with these locations.
I just don't want to approve something and then have it left nebulous and then leave it, I guess, as staff, or I don't know who goes back through and says, oh yeah, that is okay, when we have no idea what it is.
Don't leave it to staff. I don't want that.
Okay, so, all right, so I understand, and that should be a heads up for applicant. I'm going to be asking about that, to figure out how are we going to get comfort. We're getting closer. Every time we meet, we get closer, right? But I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to hit it and say, what does that crossing look like? Okay? All right, so let's go to...
I might state that these conditions are the same as from June 4th as well. So.
I think
I hope they've scratched their head about this and can give you something.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise, but we are, at least, I think we're making progress in recognizing it's not going to go on some other route, some other place, it's not all underground. You know, we're chipping away at what this project's ultimately going to look at. And I just want to get specific enough where I can raise with good conscience, I support, you know, they've done enough mitigation where we've got to give them their conditional use permit. So, and that requires some level of specificity. So, or some process for getting there. Okay, can you go to the next one? I'm going to finding number 4. So next slide, finding, let's go to number 4. This is that list of 8 mitigating factors in the code, 162307. It goes back to December of 2017. So we're going to need to go through those. I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, Doug.
They've got a PowerPoint, but I think they've got those slides on.
Great, and I think we've seen that before. And they, you know, whatever, 6 of them I agree with. Other ones I'll have questions on. Okay, finding number 8. You know, I think you address more of this later, but when it comes to the landscape, the berm versus the wall, and maybe this is more for applicant, I don't know, but how did you or they arrive at berm versus wall? Because I look at a 5-foot berm with some trees on it, and I'm thinking every middle schooler or whatever is going to wander right through that.
Well, they'll still have a chain link security fence
Around the dangerous bits.
on the inside of the whole thing. Yeah, around the whole thing, but it's on the inside of the berm.
So the berm, so it's berm to disguise the fence a little bit rather than just concrete wall.
Yeah, they'll have,
Precast wall.
they've got, I think by code, have to have some type of barrier.
Okay. All right, and so, you know, I have, my notes are how many trees, what's the size and the spacing, and you've got some of that. So, you know, I guess that, it's almost a cosmetic question, but, you know, the station's unpopular enough where trees always make people happy, I think. So more is better. Trees make some people happy, I guess. Okay, and then condition number 7. You go forward on your slide. 7. Condition, proposed condition 7. No, it's the one. It's the one where you talk about setbacks. Did I write down the wrong one? Substation one. No, it's not the 20%. It's the one where you talk about east-west.
Go forward.
Centering.
Yeah, it's in here. Where is it?
Go forward one time.
I think it's next slide.
There we go.
Yeah, it is 7 and then under that. So we've got a site plan, and are you, I understand and agree, I can see that it's slightly not centered. Is it your feeling or staff's feeling that since they control all that land, we could create even more buffers by just kind of centering it?
Well, we met with the neighboring property owner and
Maybe, can you go to that site plan itself?